everybody. It's David Ault, and I want to welcome you to The Gathering. This episode is being filmed in Birmingham, Alabama, where I'm going to be teaching and speaking tomorrow. And it seems as though I have been filming these videos of late from all different points across the planet. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for live events. I'm grateful that as the world slowly begins to open up, that I can be able to see so many of you in person. And I'm equally grateful for this format, the format of virtual connection also. And I never underestimate the power of either. And so I celebrate the hybrid nature of this. And I also hope too that at some point in my schedule, as it continues to move forward and the opportunities continue to present themselves, that I can see you in person as well. But for now, I'm grateful that you're here. In these travels of late, as we have sort of moved out of the collective experience of the pandemic into a new level of uncertainty, it's interesting. It's interesting to watch how this has activated a lot of stuff inside of us that we didn't perhaps even realize dwelled within our psyche. So much of it is built around uncertainty. You know, it's one thing if you and I know that we're going to go through something and it's going to have this beginning and this end. But this collective experience that continues and continues and continues without any real known finality to it causes behaviors within us that we didn't even think were there. And that's interesting. And what I notice in the times that I've been out lately and teaching, that there is a resurfacing of the big lie. I call it the big lie because it's a shared big lie. It's a shared illusion that exists within us as humanity. Let me tell you where this big lie originated. And so there are schools of psychological thought, spiritual thought, shamanic thought, different religious thought that speak of a split between us and our soul. You can say that it happens between womb time and around the age of 7 or 8. Usually this split occurs around something uncomfortable or traumatic. It can have a full range of the actual event or thing, but it happens for every single one of us. And then we spend the rest of this incarnation with the opportunity to merge back with our soul. And sometimes we do that and sometimes we don't. But what happens from this split is the big lie. And that big lie is not that you're not lovable, not that you're a burden, not that you're not smart enough. Those are all sort of effects of the big lie. But the big lie, the causal root of it is this: I am separate. I am separate. That thing happens, that trauma happens, that discomfort happens, and that thought is emitted. It is dissected, told. It is the basis of the metaphor of the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. It is the being kicked out of the garden. Being kicked out of the garden, as I've talked about before in recent weeks, is simply stating in another way that we are separate. Separate from what? Separate from the Creator. Separate from God, separate from Source. The idea of being separate in and of itself is the birth of despair. And what I see among people due to this prolonged uncertainty is the resurfacing of this lie. Now, when I say resurfacing, what does that mean then? Well, it kind of means, if you can follow along with this, that the lie never leaves. The lie never leaves us. It's never fully extracted. It just means that based upon the self-awareness work that we engage in, that it softens or it quiets or it's not fed. When we are unconscious, when we have done nothing per se to bring that merger or cause that merger to happen, then you can bet that it's very active in the fueling of our day-to-day existence. The idea that I am separate. So that's where the I'm unlovable, there's not enough in the world, money doesn't grow on trees, there's only so much good out there, it's unsafe to love. All of those things or expansions of the bigger lie that say or speak of the idea that I am separate. And so I'm witnessing this in people. I'm witnessing their reacquaintance with despair or things that they thought that they had handled. And then I'm noticing that because they have deemed themselves spiritual, that they're double downing on their self-condemnation, that they should know better. And I want to remind everybody that if this is something that you're going through, that there's nothing good or bad about the revisitation or the resurfacing of the big lie, but it's really a call to remember exactly who and what you are, even in the midst of its resurfacing, right? And so I came across this great piece that has always been in my archives by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. It's a long piece, but this particular section in general, I think, speaks to this. And she says, there will always be times when you feel discouraged. I too have felt despair many times in my life, but I do not keep a chair for it. I will not entertain it. It is not allowed to eat from my plate. The reason is this: in my uttermost bones, I know something. I love that. In my uttermost bones, I know something, as do you. It is that there can be no despair when you remember why you came to earth. What is she saying? There can be no focus, there can be no feeding of the despair when you and I are engaged in the activation of remembering why we are here, why you and I came to earth. When you remember who you serve and who sent you here. The good words we say and the good deeds we do are not ours. They are the words and the deeds of the one who brought us here. In that spirit of remembrance, in the spirit of realizing that as I give, it's not me that's giving, it is a representation of the oneness of what I am before I activated the big lie. And so what's the polarity of the big lie? I am separate. I am united. I am one with God. I am one with Spirit. There is no separation. So everything that I do, when it is done from the remembrance of that, is amplified as the extension, the hands and the feet of God. And she goes, so, in that spirit, I hope that you will write this on your wall. When a great ship is in harbor and moored, it is safe. There can be no doubt. But that is not what great ships are built for. This comes with much love and a prayer that you remember who you came from and why you came to this beautiful, needful earth. A needful earth. A needful earth is needing. The need is based upon our remembrance. This experiment, this laboratory, this curriculum that we are engaged in needs us to remember what was before the big lie. It needs us to participate actively in the merging back with our soul. And so how perfect then is it that we go through such an adventure together of this extended uncertainty? How perfect it is that we get to see the rawness of the inner psyche of humankind and how messy it is. Because that, again, is a clarion call for you and I to remember. To not save a seat, to not eat from the plate of the big lie. And so I have to ask you today, where might you be doing that? Where might you be fully entertaining the big lie and just simply slipped into a state of forgetfulness? The state of forgetfulness that has you spending a lot of time in anxiousness and worry, whether it be financial, whether it be health, whether it be the family dynamic, whether it be creativity, your job or whatnot. If we are looping down and being pulled into the caverns of despair, then we are building a hospitable environment for it to stay. And remember, she said, Clarissa Pinkola Estes says, I will not keep a chair for it. I will not entertain it. I will not allow it to eat from my plate. This isn't bypass. This is wisdom. This isn't burying your head in the sand. This is remembering who you are. And there's a massive difference in that. This isn't glossing over reality, because reality in a small r is not reality in a capital R. Capital R is that you are not separate. Neither am I. And there is nothing that can ever take place within this incarnation that will make that any different. And so why not you and I go about the business of merging ourselves back with our soul as expeditiously and as enthusiastically as possible? Being moored and safe in the harbor, yeah, but that's not what you and I are for. We are vessels. We are vessels. We are instruments. We are these mighty ships of the one of which we are still a part of, and have always been and will always be. And so no matter the years that we have left on this planet, I would encourage you to not try to design those years in a place of safety and comfort, but to allow the unmooring of our being, the untethering of that lie to become so great that the reinvention of self is so swift and so moving that we don't cling to any identity. We don't cling to any thought of separation. You know, Ernest Holmes is famously known for saying that the world is a mirror and it reflects back to us our interior world of thought. The world is a mirror. If we want to know where we are in our relationship with the big lie, if we want to know how deeply entrenched we are in dancing with, partnering with the idea that we are separate, all that we have to do is look at our experience and our relationship with the outside world. All that we have to do is look at the hurts and look at the frustrations and look at the blockages and look at all of those things. Again, not from a place of self-condemning, but from wisdom. Law isn't looking at us. Spiritual law isn't looking at us condemningly. It's just the examination of the isness. The isness says that if the world is reflecting back to me experiences an ongoing thematic repetition of difficulty, then there is a belief within me, a majority of a theme within me that says that everything has to be difficult. If I am so moored to preventing and being fearful of the uncertainty, then the uncertainty only heightens, which makes my mooring more restrictive. And so I want to kind of shake you today as I've been looking in and communicating with all of these people, and just get you to remember, to remind you of how magnificent you are, how artful you are, how ingenious you are, all of the systems that have come to create this body, this persona, this incarnation of you. And there is so much that we can deliver to our fellow humanitarians, or humanity and people, humans. There's just so much that we can do for one another by remembering that every act, as she said, every act that we do is not an act just siloed from us, but it is an act of God through us. And so I want you to remember that. I want you to remember that there is nothing that we could have ever done that would make it true that we've been kicked out of the garden. I want you to know that that principle is not bound by your past. It could care less. That principle, the principle of the mirror, is activated in the now moment. And in this now moment, you and I can decide to do everything invitationally with that energy to merge back into the oneness and the power of our brilliance. So let's start today. Let's look at the thing that perhaps we are most vulnerable or most frightened by, and get really honest with it. Don't turn away. Don't busy it. Don't medicate it away. Turn to it. Turn to it. Be in communication with it. I've been thinking a lot about, okay, well, what's that for me? What is it that is repetitively sort of haunting me and making me have the visitation of that despair? And it's funny because sometimes it's humorous, and sometimes it's sad, and sometimes it's scary, but it's aging. It's aging. It's hysterical because I look in the mirror and I see the gray, and I start to have thoughts about the impermanence of my soul. And the only reason why it feels as though it's an issue right now is because I'm happy. I'm happy in my relationship. I'm in love with my partner, and there's a part of me that's attached to wanting that for a long, long time. And when I get attached to wanting that for a long, long time, it takes me out of the now moment. And that attachment makes me look at things like age, and it makes me wish, I wish we could have connected sooner. And so then that longing happens, and suddenly I'm in my head, and suddenly I'm captive by the illusion of time rather than just delighting in the fact that we have each other right now. Sometimes that aging can feel it in my body, and sometimes it makes me think that I might be irrelevant someday. And all of that, again, it's not about trying to brush it away, but it's about turning to it and going, where is that coming from? Where does that come from, David? What is that about? And it stems from I'll point in here, it stems from the inner dwelling of the big lie that will always be there because it's a part of the all. It's a part of the yin-yang. It too is consumed in that quantum field. But when I notice it, I don't have to dwell on it. I don't have to entertain it. I can just notice it and go, okay. So what is that about? And I can let it then be a facilitator in the returning to my wisdom, returning to my remembrance. Did you hear that? I can let the thing that I am fearful of be a facilitator in returning me back to the one. So in that regard, it's like an angel. In that regard, it's like a gatekeeper. In that regard, it's something that is signaling me to pivot and remember the power that I have to refocus my thought. And so therefore, then all things work together for good. Even my fear of aging, even in my melancholy or the bittersweetness that I have of wishing that this had been longer, blah, 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 or the fear of being irrelevant, I can let all of that work for me rather than haunt me. What a beautiful thing it is when we allow all of that to be something that is a helpmate to return us back to the one. So see, even something like contrast is a beautiful thing. All of it can help us remember that we have never been kicked out of the garden. So this week I want you to allow yourself to sit in your vulnerability, to think about the uncertainty, to think about where you are with regards to despair, and not condemn yourself for it, but to allow a sweet, tender, compassionate piece of your consciousness to turn to it and let it help you and teach you and return you to the one. So if you're afraid about a family member, if you're afraid about the safety of someone, if you're afraid about illness, if you're afraid of something financial, instead of trying to make the discomfort go away, turn to it and say, why are you here and what is it that you have to teach me? And listen. And listen. And journal. Let it lead you back to the idea that you are not separate. That which you understand God to be has been with you all along. And that no matter the conditions, the stormy seas, that you and I are built for this. We were made for this. And we have everything within us to remember, to reawaken, and to know. God bless you so much. I love you. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you again. Till next time.